Welcome to the podcast. Today, we're diving into a skill that you can absolutely transform your career, which is strategic thinking. The ability to look beyond the day to day and connect the dots, shape the future of your projects or even your organization. So, if you're in IT or some similar field and feeling like you're constantly putting out fires instead of building something impactful, then this episode is for you. We're going to break down what it really means to be a strategic thinker and how you can start developing that mindset today. So, I have a guest speaker that I'd like to invite up, Abby, who's the field CTO at Raltio, and he has over 25 years of experience in enterprise architecture. So, welcome, Abby.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Uriah. Looking forward to this conversation. It's one of my favorite topics, strategic thinking.
Yeah, I know it's been going. We've been hoping to have this for a while there, and I
Yeah,
remember you talking about this topic is that you were saying that we're not all born being strategic thinkers, and we can exercise that muscle, like grow that muscle to become more strategic thinking. So tell me a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you're at in that space.
yeah. I think the one thing that kind of comes back to my mind every time I think about strategic thinking is that I don't sit down and actually think that I'm strategically thinking. Okay, I don't find myself sitting down and going, okay, now is my moment to strategically think. I don't do that. It becomes part of your mindset. It becomes part of the way you just start to think in general about everything. You literally stop this motion of thinking tactically, and you start to almost always think strategically. And you have to almost force yourself to think tactically. Why am I going there? When you said, what was my journey in this? I thought early on that I had to force myself and learn how to become a strategic thinker. So I spent a lot of time like pausing and going, okay, I'm done thinking tactically. Now it's time for me to think strategically. Now, how am I going to do that? And I literally had no way to think about it or do it. And I would just kind of flounder, go in circles about thinking about the whole thing. Like, okay, should I think about it broader? Should I think about it bigger? And I didn't even have enough vocabulary, thinking vocabulary, strategic thinking vocabulary to apply towards the situation. So I realized that it's not something that happened overnight. So my journey, it's literally a journey. It takes a while, and you literally need to have time and experience to build the strategic thinking muscle. So if you're
Hmm.
a person that's kind of fresh starting out and in IT or any industry you're in, and you're thinking, I should start thinking strategically right away, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. I think it's still going to take a little bit of time and experience to build that muscle. And that's one of the things I first learned. It just takes time, first of all. Yeah.
Yeah, like with anything, you wanted to go to the gym or something. You don't start out being this bodybuilder. You had to kind of start out with steps first. So why do you think it's important to become a strategic thinker for your career, or helping in your organization?
Yeah, I think it's a natural progression of life in general. I think is to become strategic, thinking strategically. And what does it really mean? That means understanding and knowing the context of the decision that you're making, whether it's a tactical decision or whatever. Knowing the context of that decision and understanding what are all the implications of making that decision on the various domains that it touches, right? And then going, is it the right decision? And then maybe saying, maybe not, or maybe it is, but maybe with a twist and a tweak to it. The ability to do that, I think, is valuable in anything we do. I think from everything from I'll go as basic as from parenting, even though it's not basic, nothing basic about parenting, but it goes from that. What is different about us and the children that we parent, right? Is that they're tactical thinkers for the most part, and we're strategic thinkers. We're thinking about the bigger picture when they're making the decision. So it's that maturity, the level of like kind of growing up over the years. So I don't think I think it's really valuable to have it in every industry, and I think it's a natural progression of how you grow in your ability to think. Now, having said that, I still think it's important to be able to make tactical decisions and be able to think at that level, and then also still be able to do strategic thinking. I don't think they both are mutually exclusive. I think you need them both at the same time. One thing I have noticed is as I've become more of a strategic thinker, I've delegated more of the tactical thinking to my team. So I find
Mm.
myself not doing as much tactical thinking And so my tactical muscle is a little weaker than my
Mm.
strategic muscle. So sometimes I actually depend on other people for that tactical decision making or tactical thought process.
Yeah, that's very true. So what kind of helps you switch between being reactive to proactive and start thinking strategically?
Um, I think, well, reactive is never, in my mind, reactive is almost never strategic. So if you're reacting to something, then you didn't put enough strategic thought into it that, whatever you're reacting to didn't have enough strategic thought to mitigate the reason why you're having to react to something, right? That's that to my mind. Anytime you're reacting to something, it never had a good strategic foundation. Now, I think proactivity definitely has a good strategic foundation. Like you think strategically, you plan properly, you have some tactical decisions that you've made along the way and whatnot, and then you kind of look at the situation and go, okay, I am being proactive and preventing something from happening, or steering the line of business or area of business towards a certain path or something like that. That's being proactive. I think is much more closer to strategic. I think ultimately being a strategic thinker means you are being predictive. You're helping your team, or you're helping yourself or your organization, whatever you're in, um, make decisions today that are based on what you're predicting the future will be tomorrow. And so that's the ultimate manifestation, I think, of being a strategic thinker. And just to make it more real, um, obviously right now, what is the biggest hottest thing going on? Everybody's talking about it, right? If you just say it, everybody knows it's AI. Everybody's talking about it, and that's what they want to do. What does it take to be a strategic thinker in this world right now of AI, where about 6 months ago, or a year ago, nobody could have predicted we were going to be here today. Like it's gone much faster than it's going now. So the only thing I gather from a situation like this is for me to think of an extreme case of what can happen in the next 6 to 12 months. So when somebody says, "Oh, in the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to see more AI doing this, or AI, being more agentic, and agents working more and doing more co-pilots and all these different things." I go, no, no, no. Take it to the nth degree. Push the boundary and go, how far do we think we can go with that? And that may be our reality in 12 months. You know what I mean? Bringing it closer in time. So those kind of extrapolations is what I would say is what I'm good at doing now.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Like sometimes we get stuck just being reactive and then we don't have the time to think about, like, hey, if we did this right, it would actually save us some time, but and to plan and say, okay, how can we make this better to help us to not be so reactive. So
Yeah.
I totally understand that part and been in those situations too, where we can never like get our head above the water in
Yeah.
that situation.
Yeah.
Um, what are some like techniques or frameworks or anything that you've used in the past to help you like, okay, I want to start, thinking about this. I heard even asking the question, what if?
Yeah.
What if it was like this, and then what steps would it take you to get there? Is there any things that you've used in the past?
Quite a few things actually come to mind, but I mean, if I was to distill it down to a few things, I would say one of the things at least in my industry, that helped me is overall systems thinking. And what I mean by that is, I obviously I went through a process in my career of kind of going through the journey of being a software developer, and then wanting to understand, I'm creating this piece of software. How does it fit in the business, and how does it help the business? So then having to elevate myself from there and going, okay, I became an architect because that gave me a better purview over what my software was doing, or people's software development projects and initiatives are doing for the business. And I was an architect for a specific area of the business. And then I said, wait a second, how does this area of the business affect the rest of the business, the broader business? So then I elevated myself one more time to enterprise architect. You know what I mean? Like I progressed in my career step by step because I had this desire to constantly broaden my horizon and understand, how do all these domains, all these systems, all these technologies, people, process, all of that, how do they all interact with each other, so that I can understand how they work. So uh, I wouldn't say this is a framework, but it's just a way of kind of constantly asking yourself, if you can elevate yourself a little bit out of the situation to your manager's level or your other and play it from that point of view. See if you can
Hmm.
play the same scenario from their point of view and saying what would be their experience or what would be their perception of that same situation. The other thing that I did a lot of was um, I had like this taxonomy. I have this taxonomy right now that I always use, and the taxonomy is very simple. It did develop out of enterprise architecture, so all my thinking is also based on that, and that is as soon as we look at a certain, say we're trying to make a decision on a specific software package or something like that, right? We're going to decide on something that we're going to use for the company, and it's going to be we're making a decision on that. Is it a strategically correct decision for us to make, and serving a purpose or whatever? I always apply the concept of is it is it secure? All the IT principle concept. Is it secure? Is it compliant? What is the experience like? Is it scalable? What happens if we go as a company tomorrow? And then I will take the company themes. And the company theme, for example, our theme is, we're doing all kinds of AI type work, right? AI Prime and all of these things to make sure we're more enabled on there. I'll then go, what are its AI capabilities? Does it align with our goal? So I just start asking questions based on company goals or mission that we're trying to accomplish or the direction we're heading. And then those questions, I apply it to this one particular topic, the software, and I go, yes, it does fit all those criteria. So I'm making the right decision. I'm making a decision that's forward thinking. Um, those are some of the basic ways I guess I approach it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's good to look at all the different pieces. I mean, I remember when I was working as a business relationship manager, it opened my eyes because I saw how other people were using that service or that
Yeah.
application or that tool, and you saw how it actually helped them do their jobs, and then you go back on the IT side, the back end side, like okay, making these changes can affect this downstream.
Yeah.
So instead of just being siloed and narrow vision to be like, okay, let me just do this. This is what I need to do. Like, oh, how's this going to affect things through other people or other processes that they have?
Yeah. Well, you'll
So
notice that in industry, you'll notice that the most strategic of thinkers have actually done roles, so many a variety of roles in a specific industry. They end up ultimately becoming the most strategic of thinkers because they can think from every persona's point of view within that business. For example, I've had roles in sales. I've had roles in customer success, as you know. I've had roles in technology where I'm actually developing, software and software development and engineering. Obviously, architecture roles I've had. I've also had roles in IT where I'm doing like server consolidations and infrastructure architecture and all those kind of things. By having these roles, um, and including customer success is one of the important ones because it gave me empathy for the actual person consuming consuming the product on the other end, right? So when you have this gamut, this wide gamut of like experience of different personas, you can really be strategic because as soon as you start to think about a particular uh, problem or a solution or whatever it is, you immediately know how it applies to all these parts of the business, from the end user that's going to consume it all the way into people that have to buy, build it and sell it and everybody else. And you know what the impact is going to be. So I think if somebody was to grow their strategic thinking ability, is to definitely try to find various roles they can play in the organization, whether it's one company or multiple companies, and just kind of shifting around a little bit. Sometimes it's difficult to do that. I've been lucky that I've been able to do it. Some people can't. But if you can do that, the broader your experience, the more you'll know the strategic impact uh, of being, of making some decisions or thinking along those lines.
hmm yeah, and sometimes it's being daring to be different or change what the status quo is. I was reading the story about Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft,
Yeah,
and how he was even trying to change the culture of because Microsoft back then was a very on-premise software based
yeah,
company, and he saw the future of the cloud, and he's like, okay, well, we need to start moving ourselves that way, and he got a lot of resistance. They're saying no, like, this is what we do. We build operating systems, we build applications, and we sell this, these softwares to enterprise, and everybody loves it. We have a huge dominant role in it, and they were doing well in that, but it was kind of like they're going to get stagnant that way. So he had to push and think like, hey, what's going to happen, 5, 10 years down the road? Things are going to cloud services and even now AI and stuff.
Yeah.
But he had to, dare to be different and change that status quo that Microsoft had, and
Yeah.
go from a like, oh, we know it all, to like a learning mentality. Like, we need to learn how to do these things and learn from others who maybe even our competitors like AWS, Amazon, that they're how they're doing. Like, hey, learn from them. They're doing it well. Let's build our own cloud services. And it really helped Microsoft continue to be one of those leading edge tech companies. Where if they just stayed on selling software, they probably would have got left behind
Yeah.
on premise things.
Yeah, and I look at something like very similar in terms of cloud computing and how that kind of evolved over the time. And even in software development, there was many different evolutions from, regular, straightforward, straight function-based coding to then getting into like linear programming, really what it was, and getting into object-oriented design or object-oriented programming, and then it went to service-oriented architectures, and then you went to client server and all these different concepts that kind of evolved over time. If you look at all of these things, there's a lesson to be learned from all of those of how people adopted it. For example, cloud computing. To this day, there are still companies that are still doing the migration, the move to cloud, especially for certain core business functions in certain areas. I mean, there are some other companies that, of course, have born in the cloud in the sense they just everything they do is SaaS, right? But then there are some companies with some huge, deep histories and legacy, a lot of the huge legacy footprints. They're still out there doing this work, and they're slowly migrating and transitioning. So based on that, you can just apply it. I'm just showing you how I would apply that same principle to AI and just say it's going to happen in AI too. There are some that are going to just adopt it right away and going to flourish in it and thrive in it. And then there are some going to just experiment here and there in little pockets while they still maintain some other core business functions and everything that is not AI touched, it cannot be touched by AI because of compliance and other regulatory issues. And then you can have some other companies that really are in such the kind of industry and the kind of technical debt and everything else that they have, they can't even explore except for minor experiments, and that's it. They have to leave it at that. So you're going to have the same thing that happened in cloud again in AI in many ways. And so I look at, for me as a strategic thinker, if I was applying those principles, I would look at it and say, that's what happened there. That's also what's going to potentially happen here.
Right.
How can I mitigate that? How can I make these companies that would be slow to adopt faster to adopt? And you know what I mean? And that and apply some of the principles that we learned from cloud computing and how cloud became a big deal to this theory. That's basically how strategic thinking works. You just kind of use experience you've learned in other domains and just transpose it to where it is today and go, what does that answer look like? What does the question look like 5 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? How does it apply
Hmm.
to the situation? That's that's what I would do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So if someone wants to learn to be more strategic thinking, we talked about exposing yourself to the areas, maybe doing different roles,
Yeah.
understanding. Is there anything else that you would suggest someone that wants to exercise that muscle?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's the simple one that everybody always talks about, and that is so what? uh, the so what principle, right? Just keep asking so what. So I'm gonna make this thing so what? What happens after this, right? And so what? What? And you can ask that question. It can give you an indication of how to at least challenge yourself, because a lot of strategic thinking is challenging a, a thought process that seems conventional and just challenging it and saying, what if you did something completely the opposite of what you just said you should do? And it sounds crazy to say it like that. But in your mind, you're doing that. What you're essentially doing is you're asking yourself the question, everybody's doing it this way. What if I did it a completely different way? What can break? What will go wrong? And then you may run up into against conventional wisdom that says, hey, that thing is never going to work. It's never worked in the past. Again, never going to work. Then you go, wait a second. What if I changed what if
Mm,
I change this one thing about it? Will it work then? And so this kind of iterative thinking, iterative like process of challenging yourself and asking how can you solve, so that's, I think that's one of the other things that I find myself doing is just looping and iterating over a solution, going, how can I make something work and what would I need to make something work in a perfect world? And then I go, and that is And so then I'll go, okay, in a perfect world, with all these different things, if they were in the perfect place and they were all supporting this decision that I'm making, this would work. Then I go, how can I go about making those things happen? And that's the
Yeah.
next level. I go, and then I challenge myself to go, okay, I may need to go talk to leadership about doing this, X, Y, Z, these things. I may need to talk to the product team about doing X, Y, Z, these things. And then I just kind of build a roadmap of how to make it happen based on that premise that I want to make this true, this one, decision true or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard it this way, like start with the end in mind. Like
Yeah,
where do you want to end up at? Like just think of that. Like, okay. And
yeah,
then, like if you're, let's say you're climbing a mountain, like I want to get to the top of that mountain. And then you kind of fill in the blanks. Like, okay, well, what do I need to get there? Like, what
right.
what do I need to prepare for it? What time of year do I need to do it for? Then you start planning those little things out, but you first think of like, where do I want to end up at?
Yeah,
And that's the strategic thinking of thinking further ahead than just the one step in front of you. Because sometimes people they're just walking, and just one step in front of them, but they're wandering. Like then
yeah,
you look back, like, hey, where did I go? Like I just kind of walked in circles.
yeah,
I didn't really get anywhere. But if you start with the end in mind, then you're like, okay, at least I'm marching in a certain direction. I'm taking small steps to get there, and then eventually you may, end
yeah,
up maybe you won't end up at the top of the mountain, but you end up maybe in
right.
the same area. Like, wow, that's great. It's better than where I started from.
Yeah, yeah, and you've heard me say this a few times, in other contexts too, about what does do you know do you know what you want the future to look like? Do paint a picture of what the future should look like, and
Hmm.
then you can march towards it. And the fact that you're thinking about what the future should look like, that is making you strategic in some ways, because it's forcing you to think, what is it going to be, 6 months down the road, 12 months down the road, and things like that, and looking at the consequences of it. So, um, yeah, forcing yourself to think ahead of where you are today. I think it comes very naturally for us in certain domains. It just doesn't come naturally in other domains for us. And you just have to work at it, because I'll tell you one thing. I feel like I've done a good job of being a strategic thinker about certain things. And then I open it up to some other folks that I know, and share the idea with them. And they think so much further ahead and give me ideas about things that could either go wrong or will go right about some of the concepts and ideas that I have. I'm like, oh my gosh, how did they elevate themselves that far up? You know what I mean? Like I thought I was good at this, and then they just took it to the nth degree, and I'm like, I need to learn from them. So I think another lesson here is just kind of be open-minded to learning from other people how they think about these things, and then you'll notice these patterns that they apply to these things, that are just repetitive patterns that they bring to the table, that you can also adopt and use that. Again, I think strategic thinking is, you're never going to reach the end game here with strategic. I
Right.
think you're going to keep growing and growing and growing. I think there's a point where you can promote yourself from being a tactical thinker to a strategic thinker. You can get that promotion. That's not a hard promotion. You can get it over time and you'll get it. But in strategic thinking, the different levels, I mean, you know, that's going to be a tough one. It's a long
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah, that's a good point. Learn from others. Always try to learn from others and like, oh, that's a good point, or I liked how they did that, and
Yeah.
you add it to your repertoire of things that you
Yep.
how you think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I always ask our guests, um, you know, this is one of the reasons why I created this podcast is I wanted to help people who are earlier on in their career to learn some of these skills, or exploration of different areas, especially in tech. So if you were to talk to yourself 20 years ago, or when you're first starting out earlier in your career, what kind of advice would you give yourself?
Wow. About strategic thinking, huh?
It doesn't have to be a strategic thing, it could be anything, but like what would you
Yeah.
if you had some time to talk to yourself, to help them be successful
Yeah.
in help yourself be successful in your career, what kind of advice would you give yourself?
Um, you don't have to have the answer to everything. Okay, and I think that's probably the one thing that I put myself in very challenging situations, I think, all the time, thinking only way to demonstrate the ability that I can do something, that I'm good at what I do, is by having the answer to everything, you know?
Mhm.
And I think stay curious and learn and be curious and ask a lot of questions from the time you start your career, and just keep asking questions. And to this day, I find myself, on various calls asking questions. And I've kind of gone full circle. I've gone to the point where I should have been when I was early in my career. And what it did force me early in my career, because I didn't want to ask questions, because I associated that with a lack of knowledge, and maybe people would judge me as not knowing enough, right? And because of that, what I used to do is just go and read a lot. I just read everything. I mean, if you looked at my bookshelf, you probably can't see that one. That's like 1/10 of the books that I have. I have, like, about 250 IT books, technology books, computer books. And I can literally say about 60% of every one of those books I've read. I've read complete, like, as if like it was like a storybook. I read it. The reason was because I didn't have the stomach or the personality at that time, early in my career, to ask a lot of questions. So I felt
Mm,
like the only way I can answer this is to go off in my little world with a bunch of books and just read them all and know all the knowledge, and then come to the table with all this knowledge that I had. Did it help? Yeah, of course it helped a lot. It did a lot of things for me. Would I have been better off just asking questions? Heck yeah. I should have just
yeah.
done that. I'd have saved myself a lot of money and a lot of time. But I think what my lesson learned now is, um, ask a lot of questions, stay curious, and yeah, you don't have to know everything.
Yeah. Wise words. Well, I appreciate this, talking on this topic.
Yeah,
Um, I appreciate you taking the time out here, and just thank you for joining. I hope
yeah.
we can do
Thank
it
you.
again another time.
I think you're doing a great thing for the community, sharing this kind of insight with various people. I've listened to the other podcasts. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you for having me.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Abby. Take care.